Welcome back to Zilog and Moto. I know what you're thinking. Dave, 3 episodes in, and we've already had a wrestling game, a football game, and a baseball game. What gives? Well, the Genesis had a lot of sports titles released for it, and if you're counting pro wrestling as a sports title, we probably have other problems to discuss. But as mentioned previously, since we're covering everything that was released for the 4 systems that make up this platform, that's going to include a lot of sports titles, and a lot of series of sports titles, which I'm going to attempt to address in chronological order. Due to that high number of sports titles, just be forewarned, there will be a lot of these reviews, but I'll do my best to mix things up as much as possible. I'm going to try to have no 2 reviews in a row be from the same genre, no matter what genre, and if I do break that rule, I'll attempt to at least make the 2 videos come from different systems. And if you decide you're just going to skip all the sports title reviews, well, like the dude says, that's just your opinion, man. I certainly won't hold it against you. But for those of you who would like to know more about today's game, well, here we go. So here's RBI 3, the first Tengen release we've taken a look at, and immediately you'll notice the colorful cover with the big red Tengen logo down there at the bottom, and the Tengen cross, which is sort of this logo here. I don't really know what else to call that design, but it was part of their titles at the time, so that as soon as you saw that, you knew you were dealing with a Tengen product. And on the cover, we got some cool info like real players, real 1990 stats, all 26 pro teams, and 83 to 89 division champs. Okay, well, this sounds good so far. As we open up the case, which is in pretty good shape, I mean, still got the hang tab and everything. We've got a manual in pretty good shape. If I can get it out of here. And the manual does a good job of explaining the game. And if you notice, it has a nice reference at the back for all the player ratings. You can see this here. This is important because in-game you can see home run totals from the previous year, so you know what their power is supposed to be, but nowhere in the game is steals mentioned, so you need these charts to know who would be stealing bases and perhaps who might be good to sub into the game as a pinch runner. Now to the game. On the first screen, you'll see a picture of what appears to be Wade Boggs sliding into a base. I could be wrong, it could be another guy with a mustache, and it's hard to tell because of one key thing about this game. If you notice, there's no way to tell what team this mystery player is playing for because the logo on his hat has been blocked out. And there's the rub. While the cover of the game brags about all 26 pro teams, they neglect to mention that they only had the MLBPA license, not the MLB license. So you won't be playing as the Cubs, you'll be playing as Chicago National League. Not a huge deal, and I'd rather have the players' names than the team names, but still it's a bit sneaky. Once you figure that out, now we can decide what game options we have. So you can either set up a 2-player game that allows you to set up a best of 7 series, a 1-player game where you can either have a best of 7 series if you pick an opponent from a different league, or a league challenge where you attempt to beat every other team in your league one after another, or you can simply watch a game played between 2 computer opponents. Now, having said that, did you notice anything missing there? You might have caught 2 things. One, there's no exhibition matchup, which allows you in either 1-player mode or 2-player mode to play one game with 2 teams that you're choosing. This isn't a big deal, as you can always just reset the Genesis after one game, but it does seem a bit odd to not have the option. The other thing missing is that there's no season option, even a short one. The League Challenge feature sort of answers this option, but it also means you're never going to play more than 14 games, and there's no sort of championship tournament at the end. Also, the game relies on a 10-character password save system rather than battery backup, so the progress through either of Best of 7 series or the League Challenge, you have to have some paper handy. They were nice enough to not have a 0 appear in the passwords, only the letter O, but you still better be accurate or you'll be starting all over. Once you start a game, you have the option of setting your lineup and picking your starting pitcher. Unless you have a favorite player that's riding the bench, I don't really see much reason to change your lineup. But I also usually play with National League teams, so maybe this is something that applies more to picking a designated hitter. As far as the pitchers go, each team has 4 starters and 6 relief pitchers, but only the starters can be chosen at the beginning. Also, in their way of injecting a bit of realism, since the game is based around playing multiple games in a row, you can't choose the same starter back to back. He'll have to at least sit one game, and actually they won't show as being available to choose at all in the next game. After your lineup choices are made, you'll be greeted by the scoreboard screen and an instrumental anthem. Of note on the scoreboard is a clock at the top of the screen, if for some reason you want to keep up with how long the game is taking to play. Now, elapsed time is usually a statistic you'll see in a baseball box score, but since these games play at about 10 times the speed of a traditional game, I'm not really sure what the purpose is. And now the game starts. Depending on whether you're the home team or the away team, which you have no choice over in league play, by the way, you'll either be at bat or pitching, and here lies the meat of the game. When at bat, you can choose where to stand in the box, when to swing, and if you want to bunt instead of swing away. Also, if you have a runner on base, you can lead off with them and attempt to steal. All this is pretty straightforward, and the hitting and pitching at the time use standard mechanics used by many baseball games at the time. So if you've played other baseball games of this era, and going back to the 8-bit days, you can probably play this with little issue. When at bat, the entire game comes down to timing. Either you're good at swinging the bat at the proper time to hit the ball when it's coming over the plate, or you're not. And if you're not, well, this probably isn't the game for you. When your offensive half of the inning is over with, you'll start to pitch. Every pitcher has the standard 4-pitch mechanics at the time, meaning you can either throw a curveball left, right, throw a fastball down the middle, or press up on the D-pad to throw a breaking ball. It's not realistic to expect every pitcher in the league to have the same pitches and mechanics, but that's just the way the game is. Simple and easy to pick up and play. When your opponent actually makes contact with the ball, that's when things get interesting. If you're playing it easy, and your opponent hits a line drive or foul ball, you'll get a nice X on the ground that shows where you should place your defender to catch the ball. In medium, this X isn't present, so you have to play this based on the path of the ball, which can be pretty difficult on flies, especially because they aren't necessarily on the screen for the entire time if it's hit high in the air. All normal baseball rules apply, so if you're playing against a human opponent and they don't tag up, you can throw them out fairly easily. However, don't expect the computer to fall for that, even in easy. Having said all that, base running in the game is pretty simple. Either press B in the D-pad in the direction of the base you want to run to, or C in the D-pad if you need to go back. And the computer is smart enough to know if you mean the runner at first, second, etc. This is the same methodology for base stealing as well, and you can attempt to steal all bases, but don't expect to be successful unless you're going first to second. I tried going from second to third with a relatively quick runner one time and was out by a mile. Perhaps the fastest characters in the game can do it, and I'm sure playing versus a human being will change your odds tremendously. I've spent a lot of time talking about the gameplay in a baseball game, which probably isn't the most exciting thing in the world. So let's get into something more defining of the game. The graphics are nothing to write home about. Even for a game released in 1991, which would be on the early side of the 16-bit era, I'd go so far as to say the game looks pretty poor and cheap. The one thing I would say the game gets right graphically is the colors of the teams, where, even though they don't have the MLB license, if you play as, say, the Chicago National League team, i.e. the Cubs, the uniforms are gray and blue. However, that is the only thing the game gets right in that regard. Every stadium in the game is exactly the same. The only difference seems to be at random. Some fields will have the grass cut in a vertical stripe fashion, versus an all-over look where the grass is the same. There's not even an alternate dome stadium, so the teams that play in domes can play in domes and everyone else can play outside. Also, all the fans in the stadium always look exactly the same no matter who is playing or who the home team is. So there's no situation where the fans will be wearing a certain color to support their team, and they're 100% stationary, serving as nothing more than a bland background. On the field, it looks like they tried to clean up the batter-pitcher scene a little bit from the 8-bit version, with the batter specifically looking like a larger, better animated sprite, and the pitcher occasionally spitting tobacco on the ground if you take too long to pitch. But the rest of the scene is garbage. You never see the second baseman or shortstop, and you only see the first baseman if there's a run on first. And the catcher-ump combo looks very ugly and lifted directly from the NES. For a graphic that you're going to spend at least 50% of your time looking at during gameplay, you'd think they'd have at least the foresight to redesign it and make it at least a little bit more appealing. Well, I suppose as appealing as looking at two 16-bit middle-aged male butts can be. Lastly, for the graphics, we have to talk about the animation a bit. The animation during the pitching and batting sequences is fine, but as soon as someone hits the ball into play, oh boy. Everyone runs with their forearms. And if that sounds confusing, well, pay attention to the video footage this is overlaying. But in short, normally when athletes run, they move their whole arms in a pumping motion. Well, in RBI 3, they're animated to keep their upper arms stiff, but they move their forearms up and down only. The resulting animation looks extremely odd, and the only way I can really describe it is it seems like what Jim Carrey would look like if he was doing a character back in the day that was attempting to play baseball. It's not good, and honestly would be better if you couldn't see their arms at all, rather than this half-assed attempt. One aspect we haven't talked about yet is the sound. Well, there's not a whole lot to talk about. As I mentioned before, when you start a game, you get a version of the national anthem played, and then for the rest of the game, you get more or less one track that plays over and over. At certain points, there will be some organ music played, during certain at-bats. Think like the Charge theme. But for most part, the music is almost non-existent, and the option to scream has an option to turn it off. From a sound effects perspective, I think I counted, and I was only come up with 10 different sound effects in the entire game. Just 10. I did find out that the umpire does more of a taunting strike version of strike if you don't swing at the pitch, but I can't decide if that's a nice touch or a, hey, here's what the sound effect in this game could have been like if we gave a crap. So the last few minutes have been pretty brutal, and I think deservedly so. So let's try to end on a high note. The game has a replay feature in the game, so you can either manually replay the last play, I guess if you needed to waste more of your life on this game, or an auto replay feature that automatically kicks in on plays that the computer deems important, like home runs and double plays. This I enjoy, and does make it a little bit more like watching a broadcast, and especially on the home runs. If you're playing against a second player, it gives you that much extra time to taunt your opponent. Overall, I'm going to give RBI 3 a 2 out of 5. If I gave out half points, this would probably be a 1.5, just due to how no frills this game is. But I think I have to round up to 2, just because mechanically it does play well. But even without reviewing any other baseball games on the Genesis yet, I can safely say that by the time all is said and done, and I've finished all the reviews for this crazy project, RBI 3 will end up near the bottom, and there are much better baseball options out there to look at. Okay, so technically this game was a step up from the last episode, which is a good thing, even if it's a wholly mediocre title. And I at least had some fun playing the game from time to time when I wasn't bored out of my skull. Tune in next time when I sort of break a rule I established earlier in this episode with a game that might be the closest PC conversion on the Genesis. And remember, whatever you play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.